I make a lot of weird camera gear on this channel, and that's mostly just because I think it's fun. But there's another underrated use case to DIYing things, which is that if and when you break something, it's a lot easier to fix. It might also be easier to break, but we'll talk about that too. Right as I was finishing up the video on this action camera super zoom thing, I clamped my tripod wrong somehow and dropped my main camera, the FX30, from about 5 feet in the air. This is the scene of the tragedy. Luckily, it didn't fall right on the screen. It hit the lens square in the nose and unfortunately cracked my DIY wood speed booster right open. The glass already had that crack in it. That's not new. So today my goal is to fix this and make it sturdier than ever. Also, it is pretty funny. This is now my second video about fixing a super zoom lens that I dropped. But this repair should be way simpler. The lens itself is completely fine. I think the adapter actually sort of saved it, acting like a crumple zone. Because, you know, the lens goes down like this, it could easily break the barrel. Maybe there's merit to this thing actually breaking on purpose. We have a couple splinters taken out of the wood. 4 of the 5 screws stayed in the 3D printed portion, and 1 ripped right through and stayed in the wood. If you didn't see this video, the reason why it's built in 2 parts is because originally it was just the wood housing, and I was using a magnifying glass lens as a speed booster, and then later I sandwiched in the 3D print to add threads for a more proper piece of glass. And looking back at it, that wasn't the best way to do things. But let's take the fail of it breaking and turn that into something nice. The way I had this constructed, the lens mount on the back is screwed into the 3D print, and then the 3D print is screwed into the wood. Now I still need this bit to thread in the glass element, but I think what I want is the whole structural element is wood, and then we can keep some of this 3D printing on the inside for that to thread. My idea with that is just less layers of screws means less failure points. Now, is there enough clearance to use these deeper screws on the flange? It looks like everything still clears, so I can use those instead of the tiny little machine screws. Ironically though, when it broke, these were the ones that failed, but I think that was just because there's not very much wood that they were actually tapping into. They were poking through here. So if I extend this wood up a couple millimeters where this 3D print used to be, then the screws will have more bite. So before I go modifying anything, I should measure the current total thickness. 18.7, we'll just write that down. All these little nicks aren't a huge deal. The big break is right here. I cracked the part all the way through. I'm probably going to accidentally glue the lens mount to the wood here, but I don't really care. It's kind of an inevitability when you're working with super glue that you're going to end up gluing your fingers. But there's a really easy trick. Instead of using any solvents, you can actually just use a very fine sandpaper. I'm using 150 grit right now. Works pretty good. And you get a free manicure. Good as new. Skin is not damaged. Okay, so how am I going to deal with all these little splinters that came out? This little piece that's jutting out a bit, should be able to just throw some super glue in there, push it back in. For these other ones, I need a filler material. I've used toothpicks in the past, but I don't think I have any on hand. So I'm just going to throw a 2x4 in the vise here and make some. Just like that. That one's a good starting point. That's better. Like, it does suck that I broke this adapter, but at the same time, little low-stakes repairs like this are pretty fun. And then I can cut all these back down flush. All right, not bad. Okay, so now I just need a pretty thin piece of relatively hard wood. So actually, the thickness of wood that I'm going to need is basically equal to 1 ply of this plywood. So this piece needs to be that shape. I should drill the center hole first, because it's the strongest that it's going to be right now. 1.5 ought to be about perfect. Nice. I really just want to get it in the general right shape, and we'll finish it off with the belt sander once everything's glued together. Such a goofy way to repair this, but I think it'll work pretty good. Okay, this thing's been drying for an hour or 2 now. It should be ready to take out and start working. So really the only tough thing I gotta do still is figure out how to get this speed booster threaded back in there. But other than that, it's just sanding stuff down and screwing it together. I did still have to get rid of a 1/4 inch of thickness off this thing, and although it would stay perfectly flat, it would take a while on the belt sander. I'm only through half of a layer out of the 3 that I have to cut. Might be faster to just use the pulse saw, cut it closer where I need, and then flatten it out here, and I make a lot less sawdust that way. I was just worried it wouldn't end up perfectly straight this way, but I think it'll be fine. The pole saw made pretty quick work of that plywood, and the body of this adapter was getting back to a nice shape. There's just something so cool about making stuff like this out of wood. With a combination of the right processes, you can really form it like clay, adding, removing material as needed. It's definitely more labor intensive than 3D printing, but it's labor that I enjoy, and for a tool that I literally use every day, I want it to look nice and feel nice. Wood and metal construction is just inherently premium, even if my execution isn't perfect and the tool itself isn't as nice as something you can just buy online. But I know every little bit of this adapter like the back of my hand, and whenever it breaks again, or I want to improve it in some way, instead of a several $100 new purchase, it's just an afternoon project. This is already my 3rd iteration of this focal reducer adapter. I initially made it with a magnifying glass, then upgraded it to use a better element, and now this repair to make it more structurally sound. Through all of that, I haven't spent $1 on this thing. It was made of scrap parts that I already had and old defunct gear that didn't have a use anymore. Now instead of sitting in a box on a shelf somewhere, it's something I use daily, even with all its flaws. Could I justify spending $200 on a nice adapter that does everything this one does and more? Yeah, probably. But do I need that? No. And most tech stuff is not made to be repaired. Even if I wanted to, there's not parts available. So at the end of the day, I'm probably going to end up drilling holes in any piece of gear I get, so might as well make it from the ground up with that being the plan. Plus, scrap wood doesn't have any firmware updates. Now listen, am I saying everybody should make a speed booster out of wood? Nah. In the big picture of camera gear, $200 is not a lot of money for something that's as useful as this is. You know, when I'm doing the occasional corporate videography gig, I use mostly unmodified stuff that I know is going to be rock solid. But for my own videos and for helping friends do projects, by tinkering with stuff, I can push the gear that I already have to its limits, make a small amount of money go pretty far, and achieve some cool results that I might not have been able to get without buying a bunch of new stuff. Anyway, with all that being said, my adapter was looking pretty good after the repair. Feels as sturdy as ever, hooks up just as well as before. So all I had left to do was to throw it back on my camera, adjust the glass element to the right depth to make sure everything's still focusing properly, and there you go, the DIY wood speed booster is back in service. I am so glad to have that lens back in the toolkit, even though it was only out of commission for 2.5 days. I've done a lot of filming in that 2.5 days. So now I've got my pair of everyday use lenses back, the ultra wide super zoom manual focus beast and the autofocus super zoom. I'm psyched. I'm ready to make more stuff. I hope y'all's build days are going great. I'm feeling good. Day 3 videos. Who would have thought? I'm feeling very confident about my goal to do more than 10. Possibly a lot more, who knows? That's all for today. If you'd like to help support the channel, check out evanmonsma.com to donate or become a member. I appreciate it. Thank you for your time, and I will see you tomorrow, maybe. Who knows? Nobody.